Whereas in professional conferences, I have found that it's a little bit more intimidating, and oftentimes because you may have people in the room who know more about the subject than yourself, and so the information that you're presenting needs to be accurate, it needs to be information that you're confident in presenting, because if you don't have that confidence, then people are able to perceive that, and I think that that's the difference. Also the language, I think that language gives you credibility, so if you're presenting at a youth conference, then you have to also use their slang. And I know that that has worked for me a lot in terms of, again, presenting to high schoolers and undergraduate college students, and then presenting at professional conferences.
And this kind of gets into writing the proposal part, but I think there's definitely a difference between the conferences, because like for the NAFSA one, the proposal that we wrote was like so easy, and we didn't even take that long, but the NASPA one, like the one that I had, it's like really detailed, and they wanted you to be like engaging and exciting, but like cite resources and stuff, and so I think if you can like maybe get examples of other proposals, or like just really look at the conference, if it's a regional or national, or who the audience is, I think that is important.
I think also noting like where the association falls in terms of scholar practitioner is really helpful. So like I kind of had two ends of the spectrum. With ACPA, the presentation was an hour long, and it was much more geared toward practitioners. Although it did have research, it was also more engaging, more like a workshop than a presentation, which I wasn't really expecting, just from my own personal experiences with research before this. But AERA was much different, just a 10-minute presentation, kind of just reading off the slides, and kind of how Erica has it structured in her classes, if anyone's taken them, like the 7-slide presentation of, really quick, explain everything, and then be able to answer questions afterwards. So they're both very different, and based on, I guess, the nature of the organizations themselves. So
this might speak to the drafting of proposals, so I apologize if it does. But I just went to a conference actually last week, and I thought it was a little interesting, because I feel like one of the things that happens, and I'm not saying you guys are guilty of this in any way, is that people do not have clear learning outcomes of what you, like when I walked out of sessions, I've been like, okay, what was I supposed to learn from that? So do you guys put that in like your thought in terms of the brainstorm? Like, is that clear like to the audience? And again, I think that's hitting on the brainstorming and drafting of proposals, so I apologize. But
I would say that my first time that I went to NAPSA, I felt the same way. There were some sessions that I went to, and I was like, wow, that description did not fit at all what I got out of that. So we tried to be intentional about putting, like the last sentence says, like, this is what students will get out of it, this is what institutions will get out of our session, so that way it's really clear. This is exactly what we're talking about. But I think also too, when you brainstorm about what you want to write about it, you should just be as clear as you can, because, I mean, you don't want somebody to walk into your session and then walk out halfway through because they realize that you're not talking about what they thought you were.
Yeah, and again, I just submitted for NASPA regionals, and they ask you, what are your learning outcomes? What are your learning objectives? So you actually have to list them out as well.
that's fair. Thank you, because I just wanted to know that, because I was like, really, people? Because this is a hot mess.
Did any of you have to go through an IRB? I think for research one. Okay, that's just that.
Did you have a question? Well, mine isn't specific to just brainstorming, so I wonder if I should save it for later. It's kind of a general thing.
Can I talk about IRB though?
Please.
It's really, IRB it depends on the university. Like I know for grad project we didn't have to do it because SU tends to be a little bit more lenient on it, but if we wanted to do our grad project, let's say University of Washington or anywhere else, then we probably would have had to go through IRB, SU. Oh, well we talked about this at assessment. Yeah. So no, we didn't have to go through it. And I don't think anyone in our grad project had to go through it either, right?
No, it depends on what your conference is, but most like NASPA, ACPA conferences, and even actually 50% probably of ERA don't actually do IRB from what I understand.
No, because you have to do it prior to your research. That's what
And most of it's based on assessment data, not on research.
Right.
So.
Feel free to ask question. Not
Okay. Mine was, I guess, well, if it's related to a grad project, this is obvious, but where did you turn to, whether in the brainstorming or the drafting or preparing to actually present stages for support, in terms of faculty here and other resources beyond that, professional colleagues, where did you turn for that kind of support?
I think I kind of goes this a little in my last answer, but I worked really closely with my supervisor on the drafting phase and also the planning to make sure that I had never presented at a conference before, so I had no idea what it would look like, how long it would be. I didn't know anything. So she was really there to kind of help me guide me through the process, what it should look like, what it could look like, but gave me the flexibility to kind of make it my own, but kind of gave me like a little bit of a foundation to work on, which I really appreciated. So I definitely had her help. And then I let my student who with me also be really active in that process too, because it was a good chance for her to learn what it's like to present and to draft and propose, and so I really involved her as much as possible too in that process.
And I would say here at SU, there's a culture of people really wanting to present at conferences and having that history of presenting at conferences. So it doesn't always have to be a faculty member. I know at OMA, Monica presents and other folks present. So I know that that's something that doesn't have to be a faculty member. It can be anyone who you developed a relationship with. For me, it depends on the conference. So like for NASPA, Erica helped me through the process. But for the Students of Color conference, I did it by myself. So it really depends on I wouldn't say the prestige, but kind of like the level of conference that it is, or the type of conference.
And I had somebody who's an alumni of our program who helped us, Sabrina, and so she's kind of served as like an informal mentor to Katrina, so she helped us. And I would also say it's a big help too if you've been to the conference, even if it's just a regional, just so you kind of know what to expect.
Well, I guess let's move into drafting a proposal. For me, I haven't even seen one, so I don't know what it looks like. And I'm sure that with each conference, the length and kind of the terminology is a little bit different, but if you could talk about maybe how you came up with that, and maybe before a submission, who looked at it or who guided you through that process, that would be great.
Ours was pretty easy for NAFSA. I don't think maybe the application is as hard as the one for NAFSA. But Katrina and I just did it, and then we had Sabrina look over it, and she didn't really have any edits, so.
Easy in what way?
I just asked you pretty straightforward questions, like what's the title of it, what's the description of it, what's your guys' experience, how do you think you're qualified to talk about this?
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you just can I ask a question? Do you just fill it out online?
It's like a Word document, and then
Yeah.
you fill it out and then send it back as like an email attachment.
And again, it depends on the conference, right? But I think that most of the conferences ask you to tie in your workshop to the theme of the conference. And then for most of the conferences that I've actually applied for to present at, ask for learning objectives and for learning outcomes. So those are pretty straightforward questions, as well as a description of the topic that you're going to talk about. And I've seen some that ask you to relate it to your personal experience and why you are an expert in that field, or why you feel like you're qualified to present.
So the NOTA one was pretty relatively easy, I would say, as well. It did ask questions like what, why do you think you're qualified? What is your role? How do you tie it into the conference theme? And they actually asked also to send copies of our handouts before, which I thought was interesting. I didn't know that was going to happen, but so we created handouts that we gave out to the participants, and they asked us to send them those beforehand. And yeah, it was pretty relatively easy process. I would say I think it's different, maybe different because the regional one was pretty relaxed. At least the one I was at in Montana was really relaxed, really chill, not as professional as I thought it was going to be. It was much more low-key conference. And so the process in itself was a little bit less intense. And they were actually